Hey, everybody. I've just kind of got to get something off my chest today. And the main thing is that, yeah, I'm really disgusted, which I'm going to talk about with the Republicans in the Senate right now and with Donald Trump. But what I want to get off my chest is that I think people can be too fatalistic about this stuff. And I know that whenever I say that, then I run the risk of people thinking I'm not being sensitive to all the pain that this particular bill that they're discussing could cause people. And that's not it. I think I'm just taking as my baseline right now the fact that Trump won and a bunch of his people are in power right now, and they're going to be doing things that are just really bad. But what I'm seeing here, though, is that I think that the Republicans are going to bury themselves with this bill. And so I want to talk about it. I want to talk about why I'm disgusted with them, but I also just do have long term some hope if those of us in the pro-democracy movement actually seize the moment and keep receipts on this. So that's what I'm going to talk about. I watched Republican Senator Thom Tillis go off last night in the Senate. And, apparently he's had enough of the foolishness. He's had enough of the power games in the Senate. So he announced a few days ago that he's not going to seek re-election. And then he unloaded on this big bill that the Republicans are voting on. But if you listen close, he still doesn't strongly criticize the obvious villain in this story, which is Donald Trump, even though Trump has been savaging Tillis on Trump's moronic social media platform. I forget, it's called Incel Central or something like that. But Tillis sort of blamed everyone but Trump for the problems in the bill. For instance, he said, "I don't believe President Trump fully understands what this bill will do to the people in North Carolina. He promised to protect Medicaid. This bill guts it. Somebody misled him." And honestly, that's why I despise what the Republican Party has become. This is the biggest pushback Trump has gotten from a senator about this bill. That's an objectively bad bill for their constituents. This is the biggest pushback. And yet Trump makes obnoxious posts about these guys if they step even a little bit out of line. So even now that Tillis is retiring, he's still in this biggest pushback, can't really tell the truth. This is Trump's bill. Trump isn't being misled. I mean, it's such an asinine statement, and it comes from a guy who seemingly has nothing to lose. I mean, what does he have to be afraid of? Why go out and make this big speech, do all the sound and the fury and the performative theatrics about this and point out what's wrong with the bill, but not do a thing to take on the guy who's forcing the bill through Congress? Like, you might not know this, but I've always despised congressional politics, even back in the before times. I mean, I know some people love the back and forth and all the maneuvering, and I get that for people who are into that. But the whole thing just kind of makes me kind of sick to my stomach. I mean, under the best of circumstances. I've just always felt that when Americans have sent people to Congress, we've never sent our best. But I'm never going to get over just what a bunch of characterless buffoons make up this current batch of Republicans. Thom Tillis, by definition, right now is the best of them because he's resigning and sort of speaking out. But it's just such a wimpy outburst. And so that's why I rarely talk about specific bills making their way through Congress, because I just have trouble paying too close attention to the ins and outs of Congress and maintaining my general love for humanity when I listen to these people talk. But I think we're all going to have to talk about this bill. The Republicans are pushing it through. And, we don't need to talk about it because any of us can do anything to stop it, but because we have to learn from the mistakes that the nation's making right now. And we have to document those mistakes so that we do better next time. And here's the thing. I understand why people get alarmed about the things that Trump and his enablers are doing to the country, but I don't share the pessimism that a lot of my listeners have about the future. We're going to have elections again, and so we need to get ready for them. And so this bill is one of the best ways, I think, that we're going to have to explain to America why you don't vote for people like this. So I'm going to go into more detail about the bill in future videos, but for today, I just want to make one big, beautiful point. This bill is the perfect example of how authoritarianism doesn't work. Now, most of the arguments that I've made against Trump and his MAGA party have been around their cruelty, their lies, their abuse, their corruption, all that sort of thing. And this bill is full of cruelty and corruption, and it's built on lies, and it's abusive at its core. And so I'll keep making that case. But this bill also is an example of how Trump's kind of authoritarianism doesn't work. When I watch Thom Tillis finally stand up on his hind legs and state the obvious, but then fall short of really stating the obvious, it's a perfect example of just how broken Trump's authoritarian system is. It's a good system if all you care about is abusing brown people. And I have a few regular commenters on this channel who definitely like Trump for that reason. But it's a terrible system for caring for the long-term health of a nation. And we're seeing it right here. We've heard how unpopular this bill is, yet Republicans are still supporting it against their own electoral interests and against the interests of their constituents. They're being forced to vote for these things by one man, a gross, ignorant man who's far less intelligent than any of them, except for, I think, probably Marsha Blackburn and Tommy Tuberville. But they go along with this because they're afraid. They didn't get to the Senate by having the courage of their convictions, so they go along in the hopes that their voters will forgive them. They hope that their voters will forgive them for adding trillions of dollars to the national debt, for giving tax breaks to our growing billionaire class, and for cutting Medicaid and other benefits. And they hope their voters will forgive them for all the other things that people have told pollsters objectively that they hate about this bill. And I think because most of these senators represent safely Republican states, their core voters probably will forgive them as long as they continue to appeal to their voters' ignorant religious bigotry and they keep being cruel to brown people, then they probably won't lose many votes because of this bill. But that doesn't matter. This is the thing. That doesn't matter because there are millions of people in the nation who didn't vote last time and millions more who've never voted. They don't think the system works for them. And it's time to let those people know that if you're in the pro-democracy movement, you understand how broken the system has become. It was broken before so that they didn't want to engage with it. But if they start hearing the message, if they start seeing, the results of what the Republicans are doing in this even more broken system, and they start hearing messages about how we can fix it, there's all of these voters who could turn out, who will turn out to help create something better. When U.S. senators have to vote in favor of a bill that's objectively despised by a majority of the nation, and when they have to vote for a bill that's demonstrably destructive to our future, all because they're afraid of one man and his ignorant army, that's a broken system. That's what authoritarianism looks like. Authoritarianism doesn't work for the long-term good of the nation because that's not what it's for. And if the Democrats aren't able to make that point in the next year and a half before the midterms, then what are they for? I mean, I'd much rather, of course, that this bill doesn't pass the Senate and the House. But if it does, then the Democrats just have to explain why it's bad every day. And they need to tie it to the brokenness of this current system. So Zohran Mamdani won in New York in the mayoral primary last week. And I heard so many Democrats talk in like a frightened way about that. Oh, but the Republicans are going to use his left-wing ideology and commercials against all of us. And I just think, are you kidding me? The Democrats have to run exciting candidates. In New York right now, Mamdani is exciting. In Michigan, it'll be a very different type of candidate that'll get people excited. But why the defensiveness about what this batch of Republicans might say about you in a commercial? I mean, they've got this far right lunatic fringe, but they've actually made that fringe the center of the party. Marjorie Taylor Greene has a lot of power in this Republican Party, and we're worried about what they're going to say about us in a commercial. They're about to pass an obscene bill. And if the Democrats can't rally the nation in opposition to this bill and create some kind of blue wave in 2026, then again, what are they for? This bill is just proving what we've been warning about for years. Trump and his MAGA party are authoritarians. We've got the worst man in America calling the shots for an entire party, and they're afraid to stand up to him. Authoritarianism doesn't have to be people falling out of windows or tanks in the streets. It's what we're seeing right now in this bill. So when an authoritarian seeks power, he's not doing it because he thinks politics is an honorable profession, and he's not helping, he's not getting into it to help people out. That kind of person wants to use the government to enrich himself and his family, and that's it. And whatever long-term damage that kind of person does, they hope that they have enough money and power to avoid the effects of the damage they're doing. I mean, you just have to look at Russia to see how this works. How impoverished most of the people in Russia are when they've got this huge country with vast resources. But Vladimir Putin is one of the wealthiest men in the world based on the money that he controls through his oligarchs. So if that happens to America, I mean, I don't think it's going to, but if it does, it's only going to be because too many of us look at things like are happening right now with this bill, and we just get demoralized, and we just give up. So I'm just saying, let's not give up, because the Republicans are making a huge mistake here with this bill. So anyway, I had to kind of get that off my chest. We are going to have an election in 2026. And if the pro-democracy movement gets engaged, if fear helps you to get engaged, fine. If anger helps you to get engaged, fine. If we get engaged, if we get activated, that's what I care about. I don't want people to be afraid when they hear me talk, or I don't even want people to be angry. I'd want to channel people's anger. I get that. But what I want when people listen to me is that people get engaged, that they get activated. You can't govern the way that the Republicans are governing right now and not create a huge backlash. So let's get activated. And right now, I think what being activated looks like might be as simple right now as keeping the receipts of what they're doing right now when they have the power, and talking about it and getting better and better at explaining it, and not losing it in the details of things, but being focused on the damage that they're doing long term to this nation, so we can start to tell that story and turn some of that around, and so that we can take that power away next year, hopefully for good. So thanks for listening.